So one volume only for one instance. That's the second problem. Next thing, what do you say? EBS volumes are provisioned type. Meaning, what can I say is, provision means simple, right? So like whatever the size you have given, it will always remain like that. Imagine right now, I created my volume with 100 GB initially. I didn't have much requirement, so my basic requirement was 100 gigabytes. So I created a volume with 100 gigabytes. Now, in the future, right, if you have a requirement where you need to go ahead and increase the capacity, you can increase. But what you need to do it by yourself. You need to go resize the volume. And here, it can only go up, it can never come down. Getting the point is, so if I purchase 100 gigabytes, so now it is going to be 100 gigabytes. Later on in the future, if you want to decrease it, you can't decrease it. Getting the point? So size cannot be decreased. And now, whenever you want to go ahead and increase, every time you need to manually do it by yourself. You go, increase the capacity, and then start working with it. So let me show you one example. Let's see if I say create a volume. Now, let's say I have created the volume with like around 10 gigabytes. I created this volume, right? Now this size is fixed. Now, in case I want to modify this, okay, the volume of the size can only be increased but not decreased. And also, the max capacity is 16,000 gigabytes, meaning around 16 terabytes. So one volume size, the max size you got is 16 terabytes. Just remember this part. Now, in case you want to increase, yes, let's say I want to make it 15. You need to click modify, then it will get updated. Yes, I want to go ahead and remodify it. Now the 10 GB, it became 15 GB now. So like this, every now and then you need to go ahead and start doing the modifications. So that's the reason why EBS is called as provisioned type, meaning whatever the size you create, it is going to be fixed. When you want to modify, you should manually modify by yourself. And that too, only increasing the size, you can't decrease the size. Got it? Right. And one more thing. Can go up to terabytes only. We saw it, it was just saying 16,000 gigabytes, which is basically around 16 terabytes is the maximum capacity that you are going to get with respect to your EBS storage. So now these are some kind of, problems that we have with respect to elastic block storage. Now all these issues are going to be fixed with respect to EFS, your elastic file system, like I said, right? So that particular technology, it will resolve all the problems that we saw with respect to EBS. So now EFS, what it does? I'll just copy the same thing. Elastic file system called as EFS. Now, in contrast, like I said, EBS volume is locked with availability zone, right? It's not like that. EFS can be used across multiple availability zones. So once you have EFS in place, you no longer need to worry about taking the data snapshot, again creating a volume, again going and attaching it to your instance. You no longer need to do that. You can just create EFS and it can be accessed across multiple availability zones in that place. EBS volumes can be attached to one instance at a time, right? Like I said, it's 1-to-1 ratio. But here, we no longer need to worry about this part too. EFS, what do you say, can be accessed by multiple instances at a time. Right, so you no longer need to worry about going with the part there. Like I said, EBS volumes are provisioned type. Here, EFS is elastic in nature. What is the meaning of this is, as you add the files, it automatically grows. As you remove the files, it automatically shrinks. You don't need to define any size. Got the point is? So this is dynamic storage. You just keep on adding content into your part there. It just keeps on increasing in the capacity. And if you remove the files, it starts, shrinking in capacity. So now advantage what, even if you accidentally provision a lot of storage in EBS, you need to go with the charges there. But in contrast, here you don't need to worry. So how you add the data on the fly, you'll be basically getting your charges for that. Right? Okay. And one more thing, like I said, EBS volumes can go only up to, these are terabytes, right? But here in contrast, it can go up to petabytes. EFS is petabytes storage. Right? So these are all the advantages that you are basically going to get it. Fine, good. All things look good, but obviously they are getting all these advantages at a price. So now if you go ahead and start looking at the capacity, right? You see guys, EBS volume. I'll go with 500 GB. You see, it is around $47. The same thing, I'll go with my Amazon Elastic file system with 500 GB storage. It is 150. Like it's almost, what do you say, thrice the charge of your EBS. Hope you got the point, right? So you'll get all those additional benefits, yes, at a price. Now, what could be the limitations of EFS? It's not like limitation, it's how it basically works. So one thing you need to be aware is EFS, you cannot use it as an operating system disk. You can't install OS on EFS. If the concept of OS comes into the picture, EBS is the only choice. You don't have anything else. Got the point is? Why? Because like I said, it's a shareable device. I said it can be accessed by multiple instances at the same time, right? Meaning what? It can act as a kind of what you say additional drive for it. It's an additional drive replacement for your EBS part. But if you want to have OS this kind of thing, you can't have it under your EFS file system. Getting the point is? Yes. Right. Let's see, we got a couple of questions. In most cases, EBS use so will not have any requirement for increasing. Yeah, you can go with that part there, Santosh. Yep. But we cannot use for root volumes. Yes, exactly. Right? Okay. Right. So this is how it works. Now, what are the special things that we need to take care if you are working with EFS? EFS, what do you say, cannot be used as a bootable device. Right? EBS. This is one thing you need to be looking into consideration. And the next thing is EFS uses mount targets. So each zone will have mount targets. Don't worry, you'll get it. So mount target is nothing but an interface. Like how you have internet gateway in order to connect your VPC, exactly same way. Now you have 3 zones. In 3 zones, you have instances. Now, if you want to have these 3 zone instances to access your EFS file system, we need to have a mount target in each location, which is nothing but an IP address. It allocates an IP address for each location so that the instances of that particular zone can access it. Right? So that's the reason why what needs to be done is EFS uses NFS port, that is (2049). EBS, you did not use any port guys, but if you want to go ahead and start working with EFS, we need to use the port number 2049. And here the point to remember is you will not apply the port on what do you say, instances. These are not instance level security. This port what you are creating, so nothing but what, it's a security group. So the security group should be applied. You need to be applying it on EFS. So no need of installation, nothing, but you need to make sure this port number called 2049, it needs to be opened on the EFS, not on servers. So earlier, whenever you work, right, what you did, this is like opposite to what you did in the earlier. So imagine right now, I have a couple of instances. These are there across different availability zones. AZ1A, A is the 1B. Now this is your elastic file system. Right? Yes. Now, whenever you have been given the option also. So when you want to create the elastic file system, it will ask you whether you want to create in a zone specific or across all the zones. You go for one zone, you'll get less price. You go for more zones, you'll get more price. That's the same thing. Now, whenever I create this particular elastic file system, I said I'll create it across multiple zones. So right now I got 1A and 1B zone, right? What happens behind the scenes is, like I already said, in these availability zones, a mount target will be placed. Imagine this is my availability zone. Okay. Here you'll be having a mount target for each zone. Getting the point is, now in order to access this file system, your EFS file system, simple. Earlier, what you had volume ID, you use the volume ID to go and connect. But in here, what happens when you create an EFS file system? A separate DNS will be generated, an address. For instance, how you got address? Here also, for EFS file system, you are going to get some DNS address. Right? Yes. Now, whenever you want to access this particular system, what needs to be done is, yes, you need to have one security group in place where on this file system, not on instances. That's what I'm trying to say. So here you will be having your lock. So now you make sure that you go and add the port number 2049 here. You allow this 2049. Then, so basically you will say, right, from which address you want to allow? From this instance or that subnet. Then this particular instance will be able to access, what do you say, your storage. That's how it works. Completely different in comparison to what you did with respect to your EBS. What the point is? So this is what exactly we are going to do right now. So we'll have like a couple of instances created. Then we'll add some particular data, the elastic file system, and we'll see these instances will be there across different availability zones. And then we are going to have these, what do you say, EFS provisioned across multiple zones. We'll add the port numbers and let's see if we can connect the devices to this file system and access them simultaneously. Getting the point is, so this is something was complicated in the last session, creating snapshots and going and working with all that, right? I no longer need to do any of that work here, right? Yes, let's see that. We have a question, is it the same file system we use for NFS? Yes, Santosh, you can say NFS is basically the generic solution, but AWS calls it as EFS. Right? Okay, now let's go ahead and see this part here now. So currently we have some instances, but okay, no problem. We'll launch a couple of instances by ourselves. Okay, now I'll select one instance in 1A availability zone. I'll just call it as 1A. All I need is SSH. I'm just going with SSH. Same way, I'll be launching one. Same, we'll add SSH. So I did not add any 2049 for the instance. Now, once both these instances are active, then we're going to start creating our EFS file system, and let's see. Search. Okay, now we'll connect 1A and 1B. Okay. Now you see, guys, we don't have any specific data over here. And even if you use a df-h command, we can't see anything apart from our general root device. Same way, let me get into the second server. Right. So basically, these are two instances which are coming from two different availability zones, and we know there is no data attached apart from our root EBS volume. Right. Okay. Perfect. Now let's get into EFS. Now, unlike Elastic Block Storage, which is tightly integrated with EC2, right? EFS is completely a different storage technology. So you don't find it inside your EC2 page. So it's a separate service. You see, managed file storage for your EC2 instances. Right. You see, guys, I have like some of my storage which was already available here, but let's say I'll just delete this off. We'll take the same example, like how we tried to access the patches in the last session. Like I had patches, so every time I need to go ahead and create a new volume each and every time, right? Okay. Now see, we don't have any particular file system yet. Now I'll say the same thing. I want my patches. Why? Because these are something that can be shared across all these multiple devices. right, my VPC. And now you see it is asking, should it store across multiple availability zones or only in a specific zone? If you go with specific zone, you see it will provision it only in one zone, which is almost again equivalent to your what do you say, EBS, but it can be accessed multiple things which are only in one. So you want to get the maximum benefit, I'll just go ahead and start selecting my what do you say, regional patch. Now I'll say create this file system. Right. So earlier, like I said, yes. So if we have created that in specific zone, only that mount target will be created. So always based upon the zones, those many mount targets. So right now I said regional, right? So based upon this one, we had like around 2 zones. So it will create targets in 2 specific zones. Now you selected only one specific zone, it will create the target only in that specific zone. Let me see, we have a question here. Is mount target? Yeah, I just explained that, Santosh. Yes. Is it tier specific? No, there is no such thing like that. So just like you can go ahead and access the storage dynamically. Prithvi has a question. Storages are chargeable. Prithvi, like you should delete everything. Like once your lab is done, even if you're provisioning the instance, also just delete that off. Except your VPC, most of the things that you're going to work would be charged. So it's better you delete once the things are done in your lab there. Right? Okay. Right. Now you see guys, this particular patch is ready. Now if I go into this particular patches file system, now here you see there is an option called as network. This is where your mount targets are available. See right now, US availability zone 1A, one mount target, for 1B, one mount target, an address has been associated, and default security group is applied. So if you remember, like I said, default will only allow the access if default is applied on the other end. But as of now, our instance has only SSH security group, right? So you can't directly go and access it. So this default, if I try to, now the thing is, how am I going to access this storage? You got a button called attach. Right? When I click this attach, it has given you one long command here in order to mount your data. Now I'll be taking this particular thing. Now here, watch, this is a command which is given, right? So this is like the directory, guys, like how you said my data something, right? Same way. So what I'll do is before this, sudo make directory EFS in this location, and also I'll create over here also. Now I'll try to attach. Sorry. I'll copy my file system. I'll go with this. It will not work. After some time, it gets failed. Reason because we never added 2049 in the first place. So either this one or you try over here also, it's not going to function. Right. So now what I'll do is I'll just cancel this operation and I'll get back to my EFS. Let's see, we got a couple of questions. EFS is presented while S3. Yes, Vishnu, it's correct. Beamish should have 3 mount points. No, Beamish. This North California has only 2 availability zones. North California, right? It has only 2 zones. It does not have 3 zones. Right? Yes. We have one more question. Don't we have latency issues with all the instances? I already said, Santosh, across availability zones, there is no latency. They have like the highest speed possible when it comes to availability zones. Right? Now, where is my settings? Here, I'll click on, okay, first let's create a security group. Yes. we'll go with respect to security groups. Okay. I think there is already one security group called NFS, which I created. If not, I'll create one more. Create security group. I'll call it as my EFS. Allow 2049 at my root. Say 2049 and our VPC, or if not, I'll give my VPC address, guys, so that everything that is part of that VPC should be able to access. Okay, 172.31.0.0/16. So that entire VPC should be able to access indirectly my instance 1 and instance 2. Now let's create this. Right. Now you can see our particular port called 2049 is ready. Now I'll get back to my things. Now I'm going to remove this default security group which came as a part of the system. And now I'm going to add EFS, the one which we created right now. Now both these particular targets, they have our 2049 port to be available. Now let's go ahead and test if we can access this. Now it got attached, and exactly same way. Now if I go ahead and try to attach this one, yes, it also got attached. Now if you see these both devices, they are attached to same device, hardware, df-h. So your directory called EFS which you created, it has been mounted to this location. Same thing, you go ahead and test here. Hope you got the points. Now both of these particular things, they were parallelly able to access the same particular file system. Same thing is like how you do it. Now you just need to go to your EFS directory and start adding the data which is going to be available across all these particular devices, right? Yes. Now let's just go and check. We have a few questions here. Yeah. So it will create automatically. Yes, Beamish, it will automatically create it. Do we need each VM? Yes, you need to mount it on each VM. What if you have 100 VMs? So you need to use some automation tool there. So, or if not, if you're launching these 100 instances, you can add it as a part of your user data. I already showed you in the user data, you can run any script. So you can add it as a part of user data as well. Or if not, I can use a configuration management tool like Ansible, which is easy to go and mount all the data in one go. Right? Yes. Next, Shaker has a question. Hope we can access EFS. Yes, indeed, Shaker. Why? Because you see, I have given the private IP address range only here. So while creating this security group, right, I have given the private range, which means obviously it should work across the private subnets too. right? Yes. Can we run microservices? Oh, yes, of course, right? See, that's what. It's a storage device, Vikram. It's not like a kind of compute capacity. For running microservices, you need compute capacity, right? I hope you got the difference. So let's imagine your microservices need any kind of storage, then you can use EFS there, right? But you cannot run your microservices on the EFS patch.
Yeah, hi Ravi. Sorry, actually, like extending the question. Usually we'll come to the AWS or Azure to run these microservices. In such cases, actually, in which cases actually we'll try to extend the volumes or increasing the capacity of the storage.
That's it, right? You don't know about your capacity size. It's like kind of what you say, what do you say? It's not a non-static based storage. It just keeps on going. You have like regular patches coming up, and you want to access that across 1,000 devices. That's the best example where you can take the EFS into consideration.
Okay. Got it.
Right? Yes.
Yes, thank you.
So, Ravi, so you said that EFS expanded is string, right? Is it done automatically?
Yeah, go ahead. Yes, Santosh.
Yeah. So EFS, you said right earlier that it can be string.
Your voice is not audible, Santosh.
Can you hear me now? Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Can you hear me now, Ravi?
Your voice is not audible. It's like very low.
Can you hear me? Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Can you hear me now, Ravi?
Yeah, now it's audible, Santosh.
Yeah, Ravi. Earlier you said that EFS can be expand and shrink, right? This expansion or shrinking is done automatically by AWS by monitoring at the backend, or it should be done manually by the admin?
No need. You just keep on adding the data. It just keeps on increasing and it just keeps on decreasing by itself. That's the reason it's called as managed file system.
Okay.
Right? Yes.
And also, Ravi, you have added a security group, right? While creating the instance, we have added a default security group. But after creating the EFS, again, you have changed that security group. So in the real time also, while building a new server, we do follow the same process, or how exactly it would be?
Same thing. Like you can just go with the same. But the security group, I did not apply on the instance thing. I applied it on my, what do you say? What we call this? Our EFS file system, right? So system level, I did not make any changes, but instead, like right now I went and did it using my graphical interface, but maybe in the future, like I said, we are going to work with code and also working with CLI, right? At that point of time, you have much more flexibility.
Okay.
Right? Yes.
Hi Ravi, sorry, I have one more question.
Yeah.
You said actually the EFS can be spread across the multiple zones, right? So example, initially I'm running an instance from only one available zone, but later on probably I have decided to, for high availability purpose, I'm running on different availability zone also. At that point, can I change the configuration of that EFS to multiple zones or?
Yes, you can add multiple targets later. Yes.
Okay.
Once you add multiple mount targets, right, then it basically becomes on the region specific.
Okay. So it is possible actually even
Yes.
later on.
You can see here, right? So when I click on this option called mount targets, you have your edit file system. Here. Just a second. You see right now, if I click on manage, let's imagine initially you started only with one availability zone.
Okay.
You see you have this button. So right now, if I remove this, right now it becomes only that specific patch.
Okay. Got it. Yeah.
Right. Then you can once you got that part there, then again you can go ahead and start accessing it as the different ones. Again, you can go ahead and start modifying, and you can start adding your own mount target. per availability zone. Acha, okay, then just a second. This is VPC setting. Just a second, let me confirm that.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Mount targets, it says only one per zone. Okay, I don't think we have given those options, Vikram. Yeah, I think once you create for zone specific, right, I think it's fixed. Why? Because this is where in the section we should be able to modify that,
Okay.
but we are not given any option, right? So it is going to be specific to region in that scenario.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
And also, Ravi, do we have separate mount points for Windows and Linux?
Yes. So in case you are going for Windows, right, you have an alternative file system. Like this is only specific for Linux. So when you start using Windows, there is an other file system that you need to use that is called as FSX.
Okay, so in EFS itself, we have different file systems for Linux and Windows.
For Windows, right? Yes. So Amazon FSX is for your Windows file sharing.
And also for with respect to the availability zone, the security group will be changing for the mount points.
It depends upon no, there is no concept, right? It's just like an address point. It's just like whatever the address your instances get, on that basis you can allow or you want to deny, you can deny it off.
Sorry, Ravi, I didn't get that.
No, it's just an IP address, right? So just you need to, even if you launch the Windows servers also, you'll get the same IP concept only. It's up to you whether you want to allow it from that particular, subnet or IP address.
Okay, no. I mean to say that the security group which you have created for that respective availability zone for this EFS, right? So the Windows FSX can also use that security group to mount it?
Of course not. Windows works with a separate port number. So for FSX, the port number is different. So you need to check the documentation. They have something called like SMB. So you need to enable those ports.
Okay.
It says 9389. So you need to go with this particular port, then you can go ahead and start working with this.
Okay.
Right? Yep. All right. Okay. So now this is how our particular EFS works, right? Now you need to be very cautious when you start working with EFS. Why? Because like I said, the major point here is on the cost side, right? It is a little bit on the higher end, right? Now EBS, EFS simultaneously they can be used. So what I can do, imagine right now I got a scenario. Let's say guys, as a part of my workload, I have some hundreds of servers in my environment. Now all these hundreds of devices, they need some kind of common data, especially when you are working with clusters, right? Let's say you have some big data cluster with you, and now all those particular instances should have access to some same specific data. In that particular scenario, we can definitely use EFS. Or let's say all these particular devices, some security patches on regular time interval, we need to go ahead and start fetching those and start installing them. In that particular scenario also you can go for EFS, but make sure that when you work with EFS, size constant needs to be looked into the thing. If not, you'll get almost like thrice the charge of your EBS patch, right? Okay. Now, fine, good. Now these apps, they have like what you say, EFS as a common storage to access some kind of critical data. Looks good. Now I said apart from EBS, EFS, there is also one more storage called as S3. Now, this storage is quite different. So when it comes to the part, right? So I'll just give you one use case scenario today, so that in the last part, like in the next session when we get started, you'll understand. So where can I use this particular thing? Let's take the same example which we discussed earlier. Like I said, I want to set up something like an Hotstar application. Getting the point is, so I have my Hotstar application. Now in that, as a part of my workload, there were 5 different instances that were provisioned. Right, so I have some instances which are making sure that my Hotstar application is up and running. Now all these instances, definitely they are going to have something like common thing is EBS. So each of the every individual instance, right, it has its own EBS volume now. Why? Because we need an OS in order to run that particular machine, and whatever the runtime that we are going and installing, it will be present in this particular EBS patch. Next, imagine right now, this particular Hotstar application, right? It requires some kind of what you say, like patches itself. So Hotstar on every 2 months or 3 months, they're going to have regular patches updated. So I'll say all those particular patches, I'll keep it in my EFS. So that all these instances, they can go ahead and start directly mounting them. Ready? Now, where S3 comes into the picture? Why? Because you see, from the operating system point of view, like I said, we need EBS as a mandatory. Now, if I'm talking about patches, right, I'm not going to have very huge content of patches. Maybe I have like what, some gigabytes. Now, all those particular patches, I can store it here so that I'll get very less price. Now, when it comes to the Hotstar, it has like a lot of static content, images, videos, all those things, right? If I keep it in EBS, it's costly. If I keep it in EFS, it's going to be much more costlier. That's where, in order to keep the static assets, which don't need a lot of performance, EFS, EBS, both are very highly performant in nature, right? Why? Because you got the same options. Like I showed you, right? In EBS, you can go with provisioned IOPS. Same way, EFS also you can go with provisioned IOPS, which will give you the maximum performance. But in terms of S3, we don't need any such performance. Why? Because we are just accessing some kind of static assets. At that point of time, all my static data, I'm going to keep it inside Amazon S3. In S3, we have a concept like buckets. We'll see like tomorrow once we start beginning with S3, right? Now, all my particular assets, I'm going to store them inside my S3. Like what I said, right? My Especially for this app, the major content is videos. And yes, like how my servers were able to access my EFS storage, right? Exactly same way, we can also access. You cannot directly mount it. We have some HTTP things, like we'll be using some tools in order to go and access them. You can get the same thing. So now what I'll do is, like, especially to say, if I'm talking from S3, this is the cheapest storage available right now, right? Same thing, no OS concept. EBS, like I said, for OS, it's must. For your app runtimes, all your runtimes, everything, you'll keep it here only in your EBS patch. Coming to EFS, like I said, anything that should be shareable, and it should also have performance. Then you can go for EFS. This is also shareable in nature, no problem, yes. But what, like I said, especially this is for what you say, static assets. Getting the point is, so now we got to see how EBS, EFS, they both get connected and work. But for S3, it's not the same case, guys. We need to have some knowledge with respect to IAM and all those things in order to access. Why? Because S3 is not mountable storage. See, in EBS and EFS, you got the command called mount, right? In S3, you can't do all that. It has a separate way to go and access. We'll see like how once we get started with S3 next class, right? We're going to see how this particular thing called S3 works, and then how it gets related to our IAM and how you can access the storage via IAM using your instances. We'll see that part. It's a little bit different in comparison to what we saw. Like all the three storages are for different purpose. EBS, it has its own use cases. EFS, it has its own use cases. S3, it has its own use cases. And yes, you can club all the three and you can use them. This example is the best thing. So in order to go and run my app, install the runtime, right? So I definitely need my EBS. If there are any shareable data, I can go ahead and have this EFS in place. And then if I want something like static assets to be stored, I can use my S3 technology. Clear is? So this is how we need to, take the decision when it comes to the S3 parts. All right. Okay. I hope it's clear, guys. So in the next class, what we will do is we'll get started with this thing called S3, and then we'll see the use cases, like what are the features of S3, like how we saw the features of EBS and EFS, and like how it was resolving the problems. Let's see exactly how we are going to use S3. Like I said, S3 is like one of the cheapest solutions. That's the major reason why we might opt for it. Right? Like I said, Srikanth, limitation is you can't have your OS installed there. Right? So it's basically an additional drive. You can say what were the limitations that you had with EBS, it was overcome with EFS. But you can say price is one of the major drawback of that part there. And like, yes, obviously you have been given additional features as price makes sense. And one more thing, like I said, you can't have any OS kind of thing in this EFS.